Welcome to the Biblioteca Orientalis. Today we present a book that I consider a real classic. It was written by Hassan Fathy, a famous Egyptian architect, and the title is Architecture for the Poor. It is the chronicle of an experiment carried on immediately after World War II by this architect. It was a tentative of creating a settlement of affordable housing for poor people. This is the story. There was a community of poor people living right on the top of the ruins in Luxor, and they were 7,000 people. And basically they survived robbing the archaeology that was just under their settlement. Aware of the problem, the Archaeological Survey of Egypt decided to move the settlement in another location, and they charged Hassan Fathy. Hassan Fathy at that time was making a serious research on the possibility of providing affordable housing to poor people, peasants in general, at a reasonable price. And he had found basically the solution in the living tradition of constructing in a region of south of Egypt, and exactly in Aswan. In this region called Nubia, he had found that still there was a living tradition of building with mud brick. The mud brick as a technology revealed itself extremely cheap and also much more acceptable by the people and much more sustainable than any modern building in reinforced concrete. That was at that time quite fashionable. He made a beautiful settlement with exquisite architecture, all of them using the traditional system of construction and utilizing the current typologies that were in use in the region, in spite of the beautiful settlement that was provided for the inhabitants. In reality, the robbers didn't move because their economical revenue was actually on top of the ruins. The village, the new village called the new Gourna, actually remained empty, basically. And now, in spite of the fact that UNESCO is taking care of it, it is still empty. It was a failure, but there are several teachings that we can learn from it. The first one is that the architect is a civil servant. He, instead of celebrating his own personality, he should really serve the social. The second point is that the poetry of the designer should not be self-referential, but in reality, all the principles, all the ideas, all the know-how of the architecture is already contained in history. More precisely, it is contained in the stratification of the history that is left in our cities and or in the architecture. Quoting Hassan Fathy, once a particular tradition is established, the architect's duty is to keep this tradition going with his own invention and insights, to give it that additional momentum that will save it from coming to a standstill. When he became the director of the Department of Architecture of the Faculty of Fine Arts in Cairo, the first thing he did, he closed the library with the magazines. The magazines used to be the reference for the students where they used to copy their design. And Hassan Fathy used to say, instead of spending time looking at the magazines, go to the city. You will learn from the city and from the architecture itself. The third teaching is that Hassan Fathy discovered tradition and discovered a living tradition, not an archaeological one. During his visit in Nubia that I already mentioned, he discovered that there were still masons that used to build houses, vaulting, roofing the houses with the traditional systems made out of mud brick that basically were the same that used to be applied during the Egyptian old times, okay? 3,000 years old, 4,000 years old. Finally, I think that Hassan Fathy has a strong, important position in the history of architecture. No question about that. But I have a comment. His attitude towards the tradition is a sort of static vision. For him, tradition is a huge repertory of material ideas, references. In a certain way, he has an attitude to the tradition similar to that of the postmodern architecture, that used to consider the past as a sort of cabinet of references and images that could be used at will. On the contrary, I think that tradition is a process, or should be understood as a process. And that this process is in continuous evolution in time, is the one that drives the past into the present.